The ceremony was held at the Great Hall of the People to welcome President Min Aung Hlaing on his state visit to China. A 21-gun salute was fired at Tiananmen Square. Senior officials from Myanmar and China also attended the welcome ceremony. The military band played the national anthems of both countries. President Min Aung Hlaing, accompanied by President Xi Jinping, inspected the PLA Guards of Honor. President Min Aung Hlaing is on a state visit to China at the invitation of President Xi Jinping from Monday to Friday.
President Xi Jinping has held talks with Myanmar President Min Aung Hlaing in Beijing. President Xi says China adheres to the principles of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit and inclusiveness, and places China-Myanmar relations high on the agenda of its neighborhood diplomacy. Noting that this year marks the start of China's 15th five-year plan, he said China is willing to share its development experience with Myanmar and to jointly build a China-Myanmar community with a shared future, featuring political friendship and mutual trust, win-win development, cooperation, security coordination and mutual reinforcement, and people-to-people exchanges featuring mutual learning. Such efforts will deliver greater benefits to the two peoples and contribute stronger impetus to regional peace and development. Myanmar president said China's rollout of its 15th five-year plan has created major opportunities for Asian neighbors, including Myanmar. He said the Myanmar side looks forward to strengthening comprehensive cooperation with China, pushing forward the joint development of the Myanmar-China economic corridor and enhancing bilateral trade and investment volumes. Following the meeting, the two heads of state jointly witnessed the signing of multiple cooperation documents covering transportation and people's livelihood and other sectors. The United States and Iran have electronically signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at ending the war. Formal signing is scheduled for Friday in Switzerland. The agreement reopens the Straits of Hormuz and extends a ceasefire for a 60-day negotiation period. Walter Morris reports from Washington, D.C.
Well, the United States and Iran haven't released the official text, but U.S. President Donald Trump says both countries have signed a memorandum of understanding and it will lead to success for the world. Now, he made the major announcement as he arrived in France for the G7 summit Monday. He began his European trip with a bilateral meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. Before their talks got underway, Trump highlighted the preliminary agreement between the U.S. and Iran to end the war. The deal will reportedly provide a structure for how the relationship between the two countries will operate going forward. That includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz and extending a ceasefire for 60 days so they can negotiate more sensitive issues like Iran's nuclear program. According to the White House, in addition to lifting the naval blockade and reopening the strait, the MOU will provide some sanction relief for Iran. U.S. officials say those benefits and release of frozen funds come with the condition that Tehran works with Washington on nuclear issues.
They know that we want to a verifiable long-term commitment to not build or procure a nuclear weapon. We have that in this agreement, but fundamentally it's set up in such a way where we're going to have to attach their commitments to deliverables that then are met with economic benefits for the Iranian people. That's the way that we've structured it.
Trump says the document has been signed electronically and more details of the official agreement will be released by the end of the week.
This is a very powerful document, and I want it to be released, so probably pretty soon. I would say sometime after Friday, because the strait opens it's open now, but it opens completely. We'll have all the mines knocked out for the most part. We have a lot of lanes right now already.
Mr. President.
So I think sometime in the very near future. Yeah.
And Vice President J.D. Vance is set to attend that formal signing ceremony in Geneva Friday. And the future of the deal and peace in the region could all depend on what happens in Lebanon next. Now that the MOU has been signed, Trump says he's going to shift his focus to ending fighting there. Senior U.S. officials say Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon isn't part of the recent agreement between the U.S. and Iran. But for weeks, Tehran has said that any peace deal will have to include ending all hostilities. Israel says it retains the right to act militarily. And when asked about Lebanon Monday, Trump said they'll straighten it out and they need to talk to Hezbollah. At the White House, Walter Morris, CGTN, Washington.
Iran says the two key remaining topics, once the agreement is formally signed, are lifting all sanctions and nuclear issues. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says the U.S.-Iran MOU is an important step towards ending the conflict, but a final agreement for a lasting truce has yet to take shape. Meanwhile, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon has eased since the announcement of the agreement, but has not stopped completely. Sepe Saremi has more from Tehran.
I've just attended Iran's Foreign Ministry weekly press briefing, where the focus was the Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the United States.
According to this Memorandum of Understanding, the U.S. is obligated to lift all sanctions against Iran. This issue, together with the nuclear file, forms part of the topics to be discussed the day after the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, with the goal of reaching a mutual understanding and agreement on them within 60 days.
The spokesperson emphasized that ending the war in Lebanon is an integral part of this agreement. He confirmed that Lebanon is mentioned 3 times in the document, with a key focus on respecting the country's territorial integrity. He also argued that, from Tehran's perspective, Israel's recent actions have ironically strengthened the cohesion of the resistance front. Addressing the broader relationship with Washington, the tone from the podium was cautious. The spokesperson noted that the deep-seated mistrust among the Iranian public, framing this memorandum as merely an initial step toward reducing tensions. He added that the ministry is now planning diplomatic outreach to regional countries to discuss the next steps. Diplomatically, the situation seems to be in a good position, though we are still waiting to see how these commitments play out in coming days. Sepe Saremi, CGTN, Tehran.
Ships have been seen transiting near the Strait of Hormuz after the announcement of the U.S.-Iran agreement. Iranian media reports say 3 oil tankers and 2 ships carrying essential supply. Iranian ships have successfully crossed the area. Let's now take a look back at the timeline of the U.S.-Iran war, which has lasted for more than 100 days. The conflict started on the last day of February when the U.S. and Israel launched joint military strikes against Iran, killing the supreme leader Ali Khamenei. Lebanon's Hezbollah joined the conflict, launching rockets and drones at Israel in retaliation for Khamenei's killing. By March the 8th, Iran's new supreme leader was chosen, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the slain leader. 1 month later, Washington and Tehran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. However, peace talks in Pakistan collapsed just 4 days later. The U.S. then announced a shipping blockade on Iran, and since then, negotiations have remained stalled, punctuated by sporadic clashes. On June the 8th, a U.S. military helicopter was shot down, triggering a new wave of strikes by both sides. Just 3 days after, Iran moved to close the Strait of Hormuz. Which brings us to today. The US and Iran have finally reached a memorandum of understanding to extend the ceasefire by 60 days to allow for negotiations, with a formal signing in Switzerland on Friday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon and that Israeli troops will stay in southern Lebanon. Iran says its agreement with the US requires a full cessation of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah. Netanyahu says Israel retains the right to respond to Hezbollah attacks.
For decades, I have been fighting Iran's efforts to acquire nuclear weapons. I can define this as my life's mission. I have upheld it until now, and I will uphold it in the future as well. With or without a deal, Iran will not have nuclear weapons. Not today, and not tomorrow. As long as I am Prime Minister of Israel, this will not happen. Regarding Lebanon, we created there a buffer zone, a security zone. We will stay there as long as necessary. Iran wanted us to retreat from there. It didn't happen.
Hezbollah says it targeted Israeli soldiers advancing in a border area in southern Lebanon, forcing them to retreat. Hezbollah says it welcomes the memorandum of understanding between Iran and the US, calling it a major achievement. And that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
Holding guns. Words protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
New report on the Sudan conflict details thousands of rape cases and over 31,000 killings. Ebola cases in DR Congo rise above 800, with confirmed deaths now nearing 200. And South African authorities intensify crackdown on undocumented immigrants. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live. Also ahead on the program, Libya's National Oil Corporation signs first international production sharing agreements after nearly 2 decades. And Cape Verde holds off Spain in historic World Cup debut. We begin in Sudan, where nearly 31,000 killings and 2,200 cases of rape have been documented since the conflict between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces began in April 2023. That's according to Sudan's Attorney General Intisar Ahmed Abdel Alal, who gave the report on Monday as the chair of the National Committee for Investigating Crimes and Violations of National and International Humanitarian Law. He presented the findings from the committee's fifth progress report to the UN Human Rights Council. The committee has registered almost 150,000 criminal complaints, including 385 cases against regular forces whose immunity was lifted. Investigations have been completed for 21,787 cases referred to national courts, and over 10,000 cases have been adjudicated so far. As Sudan's conflict continues into its third year, children remain among the hardest hit. Displacement, disease, malnutrition, and interrupted education are shaping the lives of millions. Aid agencies warn that without urgent support, the consequences could affect an entire generation. Naba Muhyiddin reports from Port Sudan.
For many children in Sudan, war has become the backdrop of everyday life. Millions have been forced from their homes, and many now live in crowded displacement camps. Even before the war, Sudan faced one of the world's highest rates of child malnutrition. Today, the crisis has deepened, with families struggling to meet even their most basic needs. Disease outbreaks, including measles and malaria, continue to affect children across the country. At the same time, routine vaccination coverage has fallen sharply.
Before the war, I used to go to school every day and spend time with my friends. Now everything has changed. We had to leave our home, and sometimes we don't have the things we need. I hope we can return home and continue our education.
Like many parents, Manasik's mother says the conflict has turned even the simplest responsibilities into daily challenges.
Our biggest concern is our children. We worry about food, healthcare, and whether they will be able to continue their education. They have already lost so much because of this war. We just want them to have a safe future and the opportunity to learn and grow.
And the impact extends beyond only physical issues. Many children have witnessed violence, lost loved ones, or endured repeated displacement. Child protection workers say the emotional toll is becoming increasingly visible. And as millions of school-age children remain out of school, this raises concerns about long-term learning losses and the future of the country's workforce.
We are seeing children who have experienced multiple forms of distress, including displacement, separation from family members, and prolonged uncertainty. Many show signs of anxiety and emotional stress. Providing psychosocial support and safe environments is essential, but the needs remain far greater than the resources currently available.
Authorities and aid agencies say efforts are continuing to expand support services, improve access to health care, and help children return to learning.
For children like Bushara, the hope for a safer and more stable future remains tied to an end to the conflict that has already shaped much of their young lives. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Port Sudan.
We take you now to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 808 confirmed Ebola cases have been reported, with 192 deaths. 26 new cases and 11 deaths were confirmed on Sunday. Health officials say 363 patients are in isolation, while 48 people have recovered. 1 month into the outbreak, authorities warn the true scale of the crisis remains unclear due to data gaps and community resistance to response efforts. In neighboring Uganda, no new Ebola cases have been reported in the past 10 days, with its total confirmed cases remaining at 19. Meanwhile, Africa Center for Disease Control Director General Jean Kaseya has welcomed China's support in combating the ongoing Bundibugyo Ebola outbreak. Well, Rwanda has announced that it is intensifying efforts to prevent the Ebola virus from crossing its borders. In an interview with China African News, Health Minister Sabin Nsazimana said containing the outbreak at its source remains the most effective strategy. The country also plans to strengthen preparedness measures at entry points and health facilities. He added that Rwanda is working closely with regional and international partners, providing support to containment efforts while maintaining vigilance against the virus.
The most important thing that we need to do as a region is to help containing the outbreak where it is. And we know so many people are involved. Africa CDC, World Health Organizations, several partners. And as a country in the region, although we are not affected directly, but we've been providing our support where possible to make sure that this outbreak is contained quickly. Because as far as it stays, it affects all of us, and we hope that soon it will be contained. It doesn't seem to be going away very soon. That's why we need to strengthen our preparedness. We don't want to have even one single case, because one single case is too much to affect our economy, our lives, our health system, our social life. Even internationally, having that kind of disease creates panic and fear that sometimes is more difficult to manage than disease itself. So our investment as a country has been, how do we build strong systems in place at the entry points, at the borders, whenever there's an outbreak or suspected outbreak? How do we test symptoms? How do we manage the movements? How do we isolate and quarantine the suspects? How do we have a laboratory mechanism that will test and tell you, is it malaria or is it Ebola? Because they both have fever as the main symptom. But how do you know exactly if you're not handling Ebola instead of malaria? So you need to practice that. And you need to learn also from the situations. We are learning a lot from the current situation so that we remain Ebola-free as we've been in the past, because we know what it costs to have this outbreak in a country. But also we know it's important to help where there is an outbreak before it gets to you. So we've been providing support where possible, as I said, and we will continue as a country. That's the policy of the government of Rwanda, that the best way to handle outbreaks is to support where it is, to contain before it spreads, because it can go everywhere. It's just one person flying and an incubation period and be detected somewhere else. So you can't be 100% sure, but you can be probably significantly ready. And once it happens, you act very quickly.
Here in Kenya, the government has approved a reparations program of nearly $15.5 million for over 1,000 victims of human rights violations in the country. Compensations will cover the 2017 and 2022 post-election periods, the 2022 and 2024 finance bill protests, and the 2025 Sabasaba protests. Speaking during the launch of the framework, President William Ruto said the move follows successful identification and verification of victims. He added that this is the beginning of healing from a painful chapter in Kenya's history. Violations include right to life, sexual violence, freedom from torture, rights to property, enforced disappearances, and freedom and security.
through Gazette Notice number 12002 of 2025 and other instruments, I set in motion the process of compensating victims of protests and public unrest. As part of that process, I appointed a distinguished panel. I tasked the panel with helping us confront a challenge that Kenya had carried for far too long, and with developing a framework that would place victims, justice, accountability, and national reconciliation at its center. Many have spoken about these issues over the years. Many have acknowledged the pain. Many have promised action. Today, however, we move beyond words. I stand here pleased that we have reached this milestone, saddened by the circumstances that have made it necessary, humbled by the trust placed in us by victims and their families, and optimistic that this marks the beginning of the end of a painful chapter in our national life.
And turning to Mauritius now, the nation says it has not received any proposal from the U.S. to buy the Chagos Islands after reports that the Donald Trump administration is considering the move. The development comes amid ongoing debate over the future of the strategic Indian Ocean archipelago. CGTN's Caroline B. reports.
Mauritius is pushing back against reports that Washington wants to buy the Chagos Islands. The Mauritian government says it has not received any official proposal from the U.S. and has not been approached directly or indirectly regarding a separate agreement over Diego Garcia or the wider Chagos archipelago. Mauritius also insists its sovereignty over the islands is non-negotiable. The response follows a report by The Telegraph that the White House is considering plans to buy the islands from Mauritius. It says U.S. officials have drafted options that could bypass Britain and secure direct control of Diego Garcia, the largest of the islands, and home to a highly strategic joint military base of the US and Britain. This moves to block a previous deal. Last year, the UK agreed to cede sovereignty of the islands to Mauritius and lease Diego Garcia for 99 years. The deal has now effectively stalled, following legal challenges from Chagosians who say they were not consulted and intense political opposition from the US. In February, US President Donald Trump blasted that deal, calling it a big mistake. Sources speaking to Reuters described Diego Garcia as a vital military installation and a key asset for US national security in the Indian Ocean. In April, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer posed the agreement that would have transferred sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius but allowed continued operation of the military base. The UK Foreign Office has not yet commented on the development. Neither has the White House responded to requests for comment. For now, the archipelago remains at the centre of a diplomatic and strategic dispute involving Mauritius, Britain and the United States. Caroline B., CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. South African authorities intensify crackdown on undocumented immigrants. The Central African Republic now, where the Armed Forces Command has rejected accusations implicating it in an alleged plot to overthrow the current government. The army has urged the public to disregard the rumors that have been circulating on digital platforms and certain political circles. Separately, a UN-backed court has begun the trial in absentia of former President Francois Bozize over crimes against humanity. These include murder, enforced disappearances, torture and rape committed between 2009 and 2013. Bozize seized power in a 2003 coup before being overthrown 10 years later by rebels. He has been living in exile in Guinea-Bissau since 2023. 3 of his former senior military officers are all in pre-trial detention in the CAR. The South African Home Affairs Ministry says 2,745 foreign nationals have been repatriated in the past week as measures against irregular immigration are stepped up. Amid South Africa's escalating crackdown against irregular migration, border security has been strengthened. Since the beginning of this year, thousands of arrests and deportations have taken place. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
At a briefing in Pretoria, South African Justice Minister Mama Moloko outlined the work being done by the interministerial task team appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa to combat the growing problem of illegal migration. The crackdown on businesses and migrants has so far led to the arrests of thousands of undocumented visitors in this year alone.
Since the 1st of January, law enforcement agencies or operations conducted across the country have resulted in the arrest of more than 40,000 illegal immigrants in the country. This is a demonstration that government is not turning a blind eye to illegal immigration, and we are intensifying our efforts to bring it under control.
Tightening border controls remains one of the key focus areas to ensure legal transit across entry points.
There is heightened vigilance across all ports of entry in all the 3 modalities, one in terms of land, air and sea. In addition, the BMA and other law enforcement agencies have instituted static checkpoints or roadblocks at key corridors leading to the critical ports such as Beit Bridge to ensure effective interception of anybody attempting to enter South Africa illegally.
Officials estimate there could be close to 3 million undocumented foreigners living in South Africa, most of them who have overstayed their visas. To change this, the use of artificial intelligence and digital systems are being implemented.
The real gap here has been the paper-based system, the manual systems that people can manipulate, and also where you then don't have a biometric linked to that foreigner, which makes it very difficult to know when they've overstayed, track them, etc.
An electric travel authorization system, which makes it easier to track visitors, is already being tested.
The ETA is currently live for short-stay visitors from China, India, Mexico and Indonesia. Since October last year, we are using facial recognition and machine learning to check whether your travel document is authentic, to match your face to the photo on your passport.
Pretoria has stressed it's working closely with other African countries to repatriate those staying in South Africa illegally. Government ministers have again warned citizens not to take the law into their own hands in the lead up to a planned national shutdown on June 30th, the deadline given by pressure groups for undocumented foreigners to leave the country. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town.
To Sierra Leone now, where in many homes, children grow up having more than just dreams about their future. They also have to carry heavy societal expectations. This takes the form of immense pressure to succeed academically, provide financially, as well as becoming the family's source of pride. But for many young people facing unemployment and economic hardship, that pressure now comes with a serious emotional toll. Eric Kawa reports from Freetown.
Elizabeth Abu is in her first year at Milton Magai Technical University. She's pursuing a bachelor's degree in international relations and loves cooking and creating TikTok videos in her spare time. But Elizabeth is not just expected to get good grades. Even before graduating, she's already expected to support her relatives financially.
I didn't grow up with my parents, but they know that I'm in the city and the expectations are high. You know how it is for those of us who come from the provinces to the city. Sometimes our parents think that everything is okay with us just because we live in the city. They often make requests for help with sick relatives and other family needs. They expect us to send them money. As a young girl, if I didn't have a strong mindset of my own, I might have done things that could have led me into drug abuse or prostitution. This is especially challenging because I don't have a job and I don't run a business.
Elizabeth is not alone. Many young people in Sierra Leone are facing similar challenges. For some families, one child's success could change the lives of an entire household, but the intense pressure to provide can damage family relationships.
Parents should take time to talk to their children. They shouldn't compare their children with other people's children, because if you keep comparing them, they'll go wayward. Because when you put pressure on them, that's how they'll go. They can't even come close to you.
These expectations, though often rooted in love and sacrifice, can become emotionally overwhelming, even leading to anxiety, depression, and even substance abuse. Experts say prioritizing mental health is important and can include reaching out to social support networks or participating in traditions like storytelling around the fire.
So one solution I would pose is this. Parents, no matter your socioeconomic background, having that 5-minute check-in with your child is very important. It could be over rice crust, because that's what you have in a pot in the evening. And you just ask yourselves, how are you? How was school today? That gives your child the permission to also understand that you care about them. And it gives you the permission to also be open about your own struggles.
And even after graduation, employment is far from guaranteed. Government data shows that over 120,000 young people enter the workforce each year, but only a small portion will join the formal economy. To support the country's young population, the Government Youth Empowerment Scheme aims to create 500,000 jobs by 2030 as part of its National Development Plan. As Sierra Leone's youth continue navigating unemployment, economic uncertainty, and social expectations, experts say that the conversation must move beyond success alone and focus more on emotional well-being, support systems, and creating opportunities for young people to thrive. Erikawa, CGTN, Freetown, Sierra Leone.
South Africa is marking the 50th anniversary of the Soweto uprising, which spawned the annual Day of the African Child. On June the 16th, 1976, thousands of school children marched against an apartheid education system designed to limit their future prospects. Their protest would become one of the defining moments in South Africa's struggle against apartheid. 5 decades later, though, questions remain about how much has changed in the lives of young people. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
50 years ago, what happened on the streets of Soweto rippled across South Africa. Students rose against a system that was designed not to educate them, but to oppress them. Half a century on, South Africa is a democracy, but the question being asked this week is whether the generation of 1976 got the future they marched for.
An iconic photograph of 12-year-old Hector Peterson being carried after he was shot by apartheid police greets visitors at a Soweto museum that bears his name. It is a haunting reminder of the price paid by school children who rose peacefully against apartheid. Seth Mazibuku, the youngest student leader behind the demonstrations, was just 16 when police opened fire on marching students in Soweto.
We led South African black children out of the classrooms to be killed by white police. And it happened here. So to us coming here or being around this place is very painful. And we still have not healed.
Nearly 50 years later, Mazibuku is still visibly pained as he recalls the horror that unfolded in Soweto.
That evening, we went to Baragwanath Hospital. We thought we were going to find many of the young people. We found them in the mortuary, piled up in, it was piles, and all of them in blood. The school uniform that was black and white or whatever was red. They had no names anymore, but had name tags.
The uprising claimed more than 170 lives and drew international condemnation. It became a turning point in the struggle against apartheid, helping to galvanize resistance at home and abroad.
It is important for them to understand the sacrifices that were made for them to be able to experience the kind of education that they have now. Now they're able to choose any language they want to study in.
We are grateful that we as the youth of today, we enjoy or we celebrate what was fought, which was education and getting the freedom to study what you want.
50 years on, South Africa's youth enjoy freedoms the class of 1976 could only dream of. Yet, unemployment, poverty and unequal access to quality education remains a challenge.
Of what is happening now in our country is not what we lost to the days of our youth for. To me, it is a dream deferred. Young people who do not enjoy the fruit of the tree of liberation, who are put into drugs, who are put into unemployment.
To mark the anniversary, Mazibuko and fellow activists are retracing the route taken by the student marchers in 1976. They say the struggle for opportunity did not end with democracy. The students of 1976 didn't just change South Africa. They changed what was possible here. Freedoms that once had to be fought for are now taken for granted by a generation that never knew apartheid. But with youth unemployment, one of the highest in the world, many ask whether that freedom has translated into opportunity. For some, 1976 delivered. For others, it remains a promise still waiting to be kept. Julie Shar, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, let's now turn to business news. Hours after the U.S. and Iran electronically signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at ending the month-long war on Iran, ships have been transiting near the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian media reports say 3 oil tankers and 2 ships carrying essential supplies have passed through the zone previously under a U.S. blockade. Tracking data also indicates that multiple Iranian ships have successfully crossed the area. The agreement extends a ceasefire for a 60-day negotiation period, while the formal signing of the deal is scheduled for Friday in Switzerland. Well, the MOU between the U.S. and Iran has brought a halt to months of war, which rattled global markets and disrupted energy supplies. Now, while the fighting was concentrated in the Middle East, the impact was felt far beyond that region. Across Africa, many countries are grappling with higher fuel costs, rising food prices and mounting pressure on already fragile economies. CGTN's Robert Nagila looks deeper into this.
The first sector across Africa to feel the impact of the conflict was energy and petroleum. Global oil prices surged, with Brent crude briefly rising above $119 a barrel in March, soon after the conflict erupted. A blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran and the United States severely disrupted supply chains and pushed up fuel costs across the continent, triggering shortages in some countries and higher pump prices in others.
Some countries have been worse hit than others. Some have managed to use subsidies, etc., to cushion, for example, the fuel prices, to not make it too high, while others have not managed to do that. Nigeria, for example, which is the largest producer of oil on the African continent, its fuel prices went up the highest.
Agriculture was also hit. The Middle East is also a major supplier of fertilizer to Africa. Disruptions to production and trading routes drove up prices during the critical March to May planting season. A United Nations report warned that higher input costs would likely translate into rising food prices, with low-income households bearing the greatest burden. The conflict also affected remittance flows from millions of African workers in the Middle East, reducing a key source of income for many families across the continent. At the same time, the African Development Bank says at least 29 African currencies weakened against the US dollar, increasing the cost of servicing external debt. Interestingly, though, some countries recorded gains amidst the conflict in the Middle East. A joint policy brief by the African Union, the United Nations and the African Development Bank says Nigeria benefited from higher oil prices and increased exports from the Dangote refinery, while Mozambique saw renewed momentum in its liquefied natural gas sector. Ports in South Africa, Namibia and Mauritius also handled more traffic as vessels avoided the Red Sea and rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope. Kenya emerged as an important logistics hub through the port of Lamu, while Ethiopian Airlines expanded its role as a key air link between Asia, Africa and Europe. But the report cautions the gains may be temporary and may not be enough to offset the broader inflationary and fiscal pressures facing most parts of the continent. Robert Nagela, CGTN.
Libya's National Oil Corporation has signed production sharing agreements with several international energy companies, according to a statement posted on social media by its chairperson, Masoud Suleiman. The move follows the country's first licensing round in nearly 2 decades. Key agreements were signed with Spain's Repsol, Italy's Eni, Turkey Petroneri and Qatari Energy. The details follow Libya's 2025 bid round, under which the NOC awarded exploration acreage to foreign companies. The OPEC member is looking to raise oil production capacity to 2 million barrels per day from around 1.4 million currently. Suleiman said the agreements reflect growing confidence in Libya's oil and gas sector and would support exploration, development and production growth. The African Finance Corporation has committed $600 million to support Dangote Group's fertilizer expansion program in Nigeria and Ethiopia. The financing, extended to Greenview Fertilizer Corporation, forms a part of the group's broader $7 billion fertilizer growth strategy and is among the largest recent funding commitments to fertilizer production on the continent. AFC says the investment will support capacity expansion in Nigeria and the development of a new fertilizer complex in Ethiopia. In Nigeria, the project will increase production capacity at the Dangote fertilizer plant in Lagos from 3 million metric tons of urea annually to 9 million. The Ethiopia project will add another 3 million tons of annual production capacity, creating a combined 12 million ton platform across West and East Africa. Zimbabwe has introduced its first dedicated cryptocurrency regulations. The move marks a significant policy shift for a country that once pushed digital asset activity to the fringes of its financial system. This comes as authorities struggle to contain alternative stores of value and recurring currency instability. Under new rules, businesses involved in buying, selling, transferring or safeguarding virtual assets must register with Zimbabwe's anti-money laundering agency. Operators will pay an annual registration fee of $500, while unregistered activity could attract criminal penalties. The latest decision reflects a broader reality confronting policymakers across Africa as digital assets continue to grow despite regulatory restrictions. Senegal's recently ousted Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has softened his position on debt restructuring. In an interview on Monday, Sonko said he does not hold rigid positions on the issue, a notable shift from his previous strong opposition. Dismissed by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye last month, Sonko was later elected Speaker of the National Assembly by lawmakers, giving him a powerful position to influence government policy. Sonko's change of stance comes as talks with the IMF resume this week. In his latest interview, Sonko said policymakers must respond pragmatically to the country's mounting debt crisis, which stems from misreported debt under former President Macky Sall. The comments mark a clear departure from last November, when he described IMF-backed debt restructuring as a disgrace. Chinese officials say the country's economy maintained steady growth in the first 5 months of the year, despite external uncertainties. On Tuesday, they told reporters that production and supply continued to grow steadily, while employment and prices stayed generally stable. They also said new growth drivers continued to gain strength, while advanced manufacturing, modern services and technological innovation provided fresh momentum for high-quality development.
5月份全国规模以上工业增加值同比增长 4.5%.
In May, China's industrial output expanded by 4.5% year-on-year. 0.4 percentage points faster than the previous month. Among them, output of equipment manufacturing increased by 9.5%, while high-tech manufacturing grew by 15.1%, accelerating by 1.2 and 2.3 percentage points respectively from April.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Cape Verde holds off Spain in historic World Cup debut. There were shocks and surprises on day 5 of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The African island country of Cape Verde caused a major upset by holding the European champions Spain to a goalless draw, while Iran, playing in the tournament against a backdrop of war, began their campaign against New Zealand, ending in a 2-all tie. CGTN's Dan Williams has more from New Jersey.
It might surprise the casual football viewer that a goalless draw can be widely celebrated and remembered as one of the great World Cup matches. But that's exactly what happened in Atlanta as Spain, the pre-tournament favourites, were held by Cape Verde, the African island country with a population of just over 500,000 people. The outsiders, ranked 64th in the world, are making their World Cup debut. Spain had 27 shots in the Group H match, but just 7 were on target. It was a huge defensive effort by the Cape Verde players, not least by their 40-year-old goalkeeper, Josemar Vizinha Diaz, who pulled off a string of fine saves. None of the Cape Verde players play in an elite football league. Defender Roberto Pico Lopez, in the number 4 shirt, plays for Irish team Shamrock Rovers and was recruited by the coach on social media. And at the final whistle, there were tears of joy for Cape Verde players and fans. The other match in Group H saw Saudi Arabia draw 1-1 with Uruguay, Maxi Araujo scoring the late equaliser for Uruguay. In Group G, Belgium drew 1-1 with Egypt. Imam Ashour gave Egypt a first-half lead with a wonderful strike. Belgium levelled after Mohamed Haney scored a 66th-minute own goal under pressure from Romelu Lukaku. But the spotlight of Group G was focused on Iran's match against New Zealand in Los Angeles. Iran's preparations were severely impacted, with the World Cup taking place against a backdrop of the US war with Iran. That saw Iran move their training base from the US state of Arizona to Mexico. In an open and entertaining match, Iran were behind twice. Mohamed Mahibi scored Iran's equalising second goal. 2-2, the final score. Defending champions Argentina begin their defence of the trophy in Group J as they take on Algeria and Kansas City, Missouri, while France, the 2018 winners, are aiming to reach their 3rd consecutive final when they kick off against Senegal in Group I. Dan Williams, CGTN, New Jersey.
Cape Verde goalkeeper Vizinha expressed his joy after his side held European champion Spain in their first ever World Cup match. The 40-year-old made crucial saves in the game, which earned him the Player of the Match award.
I feel very, very proud. For me, it's an honor to represent my country. We do this with passion, with love, because we are from a small country with little bit condition, and our qualification was very difficult also in the group with Cameroon, Libya and Cameroon. But we know if we work and if we follow the plan of the coach, we had a great chance to qualify. Today the dream come true. We compete against Spain, and it's one of the best national team in the world. And we are very, very happy, very proud of all of the players, all the people from Cape Verde.
Meanwhile, Cape Verdeans celebrated in the streets of Praia and São Vicente. The scoreless draw against the 2010 world champion Spain was one of the biggest surprises of the tournament so far. Cape Verde is making its World Cup debut and sits in Group H alongside Spain, Uruguay and Saudi Arabia. The result earned Cape Verde its first World Cup points and boosted hopes for a place in the knockout stage. Fans on the streets could not hide their joy as they celebrated the team's impressive debut.
We, Cape Verde,
10 islands in the middle of the sea, protected by the blue shark, have already made history, so we will continue with our humility in our hearts, but with our feet firmly on the ground to defend our nation. One love to all, wherever you may be. Cape Verde forever.
It's a feeling unlike any other. What you make us feel is incredible. Every match is an enormous emotion. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for all the dedication and all the effort. I have cried until I couldn't cry anymore. I'm proud of you, proud of our people. Keep going, because this World Cup belongs to us. Wherever we go, we will be proud of you. Cape Verde will always be in our hearts.
Tunisia has appointed French coach Hervé Renard to oversee the remainder of their World Cup campaign. Renard will replace Sabri Lamouchi, who was sacked following the 5-1 thrashing by Sweden in their Group F opener. Members of the Tunisian Football Federation called for an emergency meeting on Monday to determine the head coach's fate. The decision represents one of the quickest managerial firings in modern World Cup history. Renard is set to take charge of his first training session on Tuesday evening in Monterrey before his first match on Sunday against Japan. The Frenchman will lead a third team at the World Cup after Morocco in 2018 and Saudi Arabia in 2022. Elsewhere, Senegal coach Pape Thiaw says his players are ready to start their World Cup campaign. The Lions of Teranga will kick off their play in Group I against 2018 champions France. They were unbeaten in their qualifying campaign, finishing top of their group and scoring 22 goals and conceding just 3. With a squad drawn largely from top leagues in Europe, they will be looking to replicate or go beyond their best showing when they stand France on the way to the final 8 of the 2002 Brazil World Cup. U.S. visa rules means that they are without their traveling fans, but Thiaw says his players are ready and confident.
I believe our mindset is very good. I like competition. I'm a coach that likes competition. I like it when it's tough. I like it when it's hard. This is something I enjoy, and this is the beauty of this job. My players are ready for the game, but of course we need to start this properly, and we are playing France, but it won't all end there, so we are preparing our game just like any other.
Meanwhile, 2022 World Cup finalist France will be looking to successfully kick off their campaign against a tough Senegal side. France, who many tout as favourites to lift the trophy, failed to defend their title in 2022 after losing to Argentina in the final. Led by captain Kylian Mbappe, the French have a formidable squad consisting of Champions League winners Ousmane Dembele and Désiré Doué, among others. Coach Didier Deschamps said they have real ambitions of winning the title. And we'll leave it there on this edition of Africa Live. And remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. Do follow us on our digital media platform. Thank you for watching. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. From me and the team here on Africa Live, bye-bye and take care.
Live from CGTN Beijing, this is Asia Today.
Hello and thank you for joining us on Asia Today. I'm Zhao Yang. It's 7 p.m. here in the Chinese capital. Coming up on our program. President Xi Jinping holds talks with President Min Aung to deepen ties and build a China-Myanmar community with a shared future. US President Donald Trump says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu must be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. And China's economy maintains steady momentum in May, with new growth drivers continuing to gain strength. We begin in Beijing with our top story. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held a welcome ceremony for Myanmar's President Min Aung Hlaing.
The ceremony was held at the Great Hall of the People to welcome President Min Aung Hlaing on a state visit to China. A 21-gun salute was fired at Tiananmen Square. Senior officials from Myanmar and China also attended the welcome ceremony. The military band played the national anthems of both countries. President Min Aung Hlaing, accompanied by President Xi Jinping, inspected the PLA Guards of Honor. President Min Aung Hlaing is on a state visit to China at the invitation of President Xi Jinping from Monday to Friday.
And following the welcome ceremony, the two presidents held talks in Beijing. President Xi said China and Myanmar share a brotherly kinship known as Bao Po, noting that this year marks the 76th anniversary of diplomatic relations. President Xi said the two sides have stood together through storms and supported each other, jointly initiating and practicing the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence and setting an example of equality and mutual benefit between nations. President Xi says China adheres to the principles of amity, sincerity, mutual benefit and inclusiveness, and places China-Myanmar relations high on the agenda of its neighborhood diplomacy. He said China pursues a policy of non-interference in internal affairs, and its friendly policy towards Myanmar is oriented to all the Myanmar people. Xi also reaffirmed China's support for Myanmar's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and efforts by the new government to balance development and security as it seeks a development path suited to its own national conditions and backed by its people. This year marks the start of China's 15th five-year plan. President Xi said China is willing to share its development experience with Myanmar and to jointly build a China-Myanmar community with a shared future that features political friendship and mutual trust, win-win development cooperation, security coordination and mutual reinforcement, and people-to-people exchanges featuring mutual learning. Such efforts will deliver greater benefits to the two peoples and contribute stronger impetus to regional peace and development. Stressing that China is the longest shared border neighbour and a reliable friend and partner of Myanmar, Xi said both sides must maintain strategic clarity and unity amid a turbulent international landscape. Highlighting the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor as a flagship project under the Belt and Road Initiative, President Xi urged steady progress on key projects whilst ensuring security so as to boost growth and livelihoods. He said China is willing to step up support for post-earthquake reconstruction in Myanmar and deliver more small and beautiful assistance projects, jointly telling the story of China-Myanmar mutually beneficial cooperation. He said the two sides should continue to crack down hard on online gambling and telecom fraud, as well as drug smuggling, to effectively safeguard the interests and security of the people of both countries. He said China supports relevant parties in Myanmar in advancing peace and reconciliation through dialogue and achieving